The City of Rollingwood Joint City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will come to order Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 at 6:02 p.m. We will start with roll call with City Council, beginning with Ms. Brown.
Brooke Brown. Sarah Hudson.
Alec Robinson.
Phil McDuffie. Billy Sheen.
Gavin Massingill, quorum present of City Council. We'll move on to roll call for
Planning and Zoning.
Planning and Zoning.
And I'm standing in for Dave Bench. He asked me to chair this joint meeting tonight. So please, can we have roll call for P and Z? Wherever y'all are.
Michael Rhodes.
Right, Michael?
Michael Hall.
Where? Oh, Jerry is behind him. Alec. So we have a quorum.
All right, being quorum present, we'll move on to public comment. Anyone wishing to testify on items not on the agenda for this evening? Okay.
First I have Jean Fight.
Jean? Is Jean present?
Mr. Fight. Yeah.
Yes. Would you like to testify on something? That's okay. We are too sometimes. Would you like to testify on something not on the agenda? No. Okay. So he's going to testify on something on the agenda. Who was out? Who else? Shanti. Come on up, Shanti.
Okay. Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. And I don't see everybody here, but anyway. I want to show you all something. This is the show and tell. Okay, see this? Everybody? This is the material that was generated by this strike force over a period of 2 years, would you say? Now it's almost 3. I attended every single meeting of that commission. Most of them during the pandemic were online, so by Zoom. But I printed it, read it, studied it. I'm glad I wasn't on that committee, because just understanding all the material that they had to go through was a lot of work. Okay. Now, as you all know, I have to say this for the appreciation. In 2020, 5/20th of 2020, the City Council hired a company called Pegasus to do a comprehensive study of our commercial zone and partially of the residential. We paid $60,000, and in the end, the citizens were not happy with the output, and they decided that they would like to have their own committee, and the council made that happen, and we had the strike force. What I want to say is the city paid $60,000 for the plan and it didn't work, so we went back to our own neighbors, this talented group of passionate citizens under the stellar leadership of Tom Farrell, 4-time mayor, and always involved in city matters. They were entrusted to create the plan that you're going to be studying today, and probably, hopefully, adopt it with very little changes. And what I want to say is this strike force pulled out all the stoppers in formulating the final product that you guys are going to be working on or approving at some point of time. They have worked tirelessly over 2 years. In fact, the fall of this year, it'll be 3 years. And it's a labor of love for our community. Now, if anyone here has attended these meetings, like I said, I attended almost everyone via Zoom. This is a magnus opus that they have created for our community. No amount of money can give you that product, okay? Just be aware of that. We'd go broke if we even had the money. Please read and understand how much work went into this document So if anybody has any criticism to level at the committee, please do so after you have read, understood, studied, researched what went into that final product. I find that very often people do not attend meetings, but think they know what is in that document. And really, the reality is far from what you imagine it is. There is a lot that goes into a final document. And this committee, and I have to point out, Ryan Clinton and Brooke Brown, among others, have played an extremely stellar role. They have really given of themselves to do this. And I have Tom's permission to say that. I don't need the permission, but I want it anyway. Okay. Kudos to Tom, Brooke, Ryan, and all of you for your selfless service to Rollingwood in serving in the strike force. Finally, those wishing to serve in any capacity in our city matters, on the commissions or boards, please read this material and understand what it takes to be a part of the community and of the governmental organizations that we have. It is very easy to level criticism, very easy to do that. But this is not a moment for criticism. Critical thinking, critical suggestions for improvement, yes. But please refrain from criticizing before you have understood what is going to be presented to you. I went over the top here, but I just had to say, because I witnessed what went into that product. So, once again, anytime you have a doubt, think about this. And I keep this with me. You're welcome to look at it anytime. You may not want to, but anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shanti. Any other public comment? Anyone wishing to testify on items not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we will move off of public comment, and we'll show Tony Stein, for the record, present for planning and zoning. And with that, we'll move on to presentations. Item number 3, presentation, overview, and discussion of the proposed code amendments and associated rezoning to implement the comprehensive plan. And I think we're going to recognize first Mr. Farrell.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Tom Farrell, 3223 Park Hills Drive. I appreciate all of our elected officials and appointed officials for y'all's service to our city. And I know that this is something that is important to all of us and important to our property owners as well. And hopefully they will find this to be very useful for them in the future as they ponder what to do with the property in the future. I'm going to start with talking about our comprehensive plan, because we looked at this as we went through. And I don't know if we're going to bring those pages up or not, but if you would, you bring that up. Just the first one.
Do you want to see the
Final.
comp plan?
That's it. And page 20 is where I'm trying to get to. Nikki. Okay, thank you. Let's see, that's 21, I believe. Go back one. There we go. So we started with, one of the things we started with is our existing land use that we had on this. And we have, just so you know, we have 14%, 14.2% of our land use is in office use on that. And I'm just going to, if you'll go to the next one is our retail, and we have 7.5% in our retail. And then the next one is we have 3.5% or 3.8%, pardon me, in our governmental and institutional zoning category that we have, and that's 3 zoning categories we have on that. So starting with that, we tried to look at where our overall, what our citizens wanted, and I have to say, we spent a lot of time doing a citizen-oriented type of survey to determine what our citizens wanted so we could react to that. And it's important to look at what they wanted and what we have as we start with, and that'll lead into why we decided to make some recommendations to you on zoning. Our citizens wanted, they wanted to permit, encourage development, or improve restaurants and retail development along Bee Caves Road. They wanted trails that would lead to these, that they could have walkability to get to them. And they wanted a lot of local shops that we could have on there. They were looking at, as a positive, allowing the movement of commercial buildings past the then existing or current existing setback, front setback, to go closer to Bee Caves Road on that. So we were moving that. We were given a larger footprint to be able to move a building closer to Bee Caves Road on that. Some of the things else that we wanted to make sure that we have a lot of people that wanted to make sure we get the drainage done on Bee Caves Road. Now, I know that's not us, that is a state road, but we would work with them, and I know, Mr. Mayor, y'all have been doing that, and I'm sure we'll get it done one day on that. There's some things that the citizens specifically did not want. We did not want large, high buildings, especially built on the north side of Bee Caves Road. We wanted to limit the height of buildings on that side, and we wanted to allow higher buildings, but not much larger, on the south side of Bee Caves Road. And the numbers are in the packet that y'all have on that. So some of the other things we did not want. Did not want apartments on that. We did not want a hotel. I know that's been an issue before in Rollingwood. A large condominium projects, those were still things that we did not think we wanted. Whatever we've had on Bee Caves Road, whatever as the development came in, we wanted to ensure that it did not have an adverse effect on the livability of our residential area in Rollingwood. But we wanted to encourage our commercial partners that have property in Rollingwood to be able to do more with their property than they were currently allowed to under the current zoning on that. So I think I wanted to pass this, and let's go to the zoning map if you would, Nikki.
It's a different attachment.
Yeah. Let's see if I can break this. So I just wanted to point out, on this zoning map, properties we're talking about are in the pink and the green.
It's green there and blue here.
Blue here, yeah. It's green on that one and blue on mine.
Yeah.
Turquoise. They would be, the properties that would not be, let me just put it that way, on Bee Caves Road. And we do have some on Rollingwood Drive, and I think it's important that I point those out too. We have the little triangle on Rollingwood Drive. And Gene, your house is in that triangle, where you are. So all of these properties, with the exception of the hospital district and these in the purple, which are PUDs, and the church, are included in this zoning request. And we have some of these that are zoned C1, which is office, and we have some of these that are zoned C2, which is commercial. And I think that I think Ryan's gonna go into the details, but you'll see that we're recommending that we have one zoning category of C, which will allow our property owners to build either office or retail, If you're currently zoned C1, you would then be allowed to build, use that for retail on that. Thank you, and I'll turn that over to this very capable man right here.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Next up, Mr. Clinton.
Thank you. Ryan Clinton, I'm at 4714 Timberline. And I wanted to also mention that it was many members of the community that served on the commission, not just the three of us. David Smith, I think, was really integral, attended every meeting, had a huge role in it. Ronald Hasso, Wally, what's Wally's last name? Grainer. Wally Grainer attended every meeting. It was very much a community effort. And a lot of people deserve a lot of credit for the time that they put into it. Staff was here at every meeting, often late at night as well. They too deserve kudos for all of the work put into it. So what you probably somewhat wonder maybe why we're doing all of this, and you've already approved the comprehensive plan generally, and now this effort is an attempt to take it to the next step, to take the comprehensive plan and to put it into a codification, which was a very lengthy process. I think this was approved 2 years ago, so that's how long roughly it's been, maybe a little less than 2 years, the process of moving it into codification. Councilmember Brown and I and Tom and several staff members, as well as the attorneys and advisors, Bryce is here, have spent many meetings working through the attempt to implement what you've already approved. And so I say that for a couple of reasons. One is to kind of just an overview of the process, this process. But I also say that because I think it's important to flag to identify what we were attempting to do, and to flag the places that we probably necessarily overreached and need attention on. Our goal in our kind of subgroup and working with staff and the advisors and the attorneys was not to do a policy role. Was simply to take what the council and the commission has already approved and put it into a codification. There were places, and I want to flag them, where the commission, the original strike force, really didn't get into enough detail to be meaningful. And so what we attempted to do was throw out an interpretation of what we would guess that they would want, but this is really now on the commission and on the city council to make policy decisions that we were guessing on, and that it was really not our role to do, but we had to because they weren't there. There wasn't enough detail in the plan. And those were lighting, signage, trees, and a special exception that I will mention. But those were places where, this is a long document, I think it's 50-something pages. If I were to advise one of you guys to spend more time on, it would be the places where we were forced into policy-making role rather than a mere implementation of what you've already approved role. And those were those places. But let me just kind of give an overview of, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible, of the key takeaways from the policy decisions that the community made and the council's already made in the comprehensive plan. The key takeaway for commercial was Rollingwood residents support a renewal of Bee Caves Road commercial corridor that focuses on retail and restaurants, while protecting Rollingwood residents' quality of life and the properties of adjacent and nearby Rollingwood homeowners. So that's kind of the broad overview and cheery, and it got obviously a lot more detailed in that. And I'm just going to go over for a few minutes briefly the policy recommendations, again, that you've already approved, that this document, this 56-page document, attempts to put into codification. The plan was to allow retail and office uses on all commercially zoned properties. So that's why we're getting rid of the C1 and C2 designation. And I think you all know it, but the reason we want retail is because it produces sales tax income. Office space produces no sales tax income. They both produce roughly the same amount of property tax income. You want retail if you want to supplement the income of the city and the budget of the city. So we didn't want there to be any limits on the ability to use the commercial spaces for retail, with the exception of we wanted some reasonable limits on restaurants so they wouldn't impose on nearby neighbors or adjacent neighbors. On the north side of Bee Caves Road, to limit development on commercially zoned lots to 2 stories because of the adjacent homeowners and 30 feet on height. On the south side of Bee Caves Road, limit development of commercially zoned lots to 3 stories and 45 feet in height. I should mention, and it triggered my thought on this, that this was not a unanimous, not every individual member of the strike force agreed with every single recommendation. And frankly, there were probably things that we all disagreed with strongly, but our goal was not to implement our own vision, it was to implement the community's vision. And so we really went and listened to the survey and the community and tried to be a mirror that reflected the community rather than a commission that reflected our individual views. We wanted to maintain the current Rollingwood Drive front setbacks, and so in that triangle that Tom showed, there are actually some commercially zoned lots that face Rollingwood Drive, not just Bee Caves Road, and on those we want to maintain setbacks. Prohibit the clearing of native vegetation within the floodplain on commercially zoned lots so that we essentially maintain a somewhat natural landscape within the floodplain. Work with stakeholders to envision and create a safer pedestrian crossing of Bee Caves Road at Edgegrove. I flag that it's not in any obvious codification, and that's a policy thing that will come later to the extent that the City Council wants to expend resources on that. Replace current setbacks between commercially zoned properties and residentially zoned properties to a 75-foot setback measured at the edge of any residentially zoned lot to the edge of any building within any commercially zoned lot. So you can't get around the rule by subdividing a commercially zoned lot so that you're not adjacent to them. It would be the distance to any residentially zoned lot. The clearing of native vegetation within that 75-foot setback would be prohibited, and the city would require the replanting if that has been previously cleared. Eliminate any existing code provisions that require a driveway on every commercially zoned lot. We want to encourage retail. We want to get rid of kind of a 1970s necessarily car-focused lot on every, parking on every lot, entrance on every lot. We want to give the commercial owners some flexibility to build their lot. Encourage the building of walking and biking paths on commercially zoned lots along the south side of Dry Creek, which is on the north side of Bee Caves Road. So we want to encourage essentially what would hopefully in the future become a walking or possibly a walking and bike trail behind the commercially zoned lots before you get to the creek bed. And I think most people know, but just in case you don't, it's dry the vast majority of the year. When it rains, it is a river. I can see it in my backyard. But when it's not raining or storming, it's dry the rest of the year. It's not an actual creek most times. There was a huge screaming desire for the community to enforce whatever we came up with. There was the perspective of the community that enforcement was lax, so we wanted to make sure that the staff had all the tools that they needed and the city council had all the tools they needed to implement the changes and to enforce the rules. The front setback on commercially zoned properties along the north side of Bee Caves Road would be reduced to a 25-foot setback if they contribute to implement the landscaping plan and the irrigation and maintenance that the plan requires. And so the goal of this was to allow for some movement of new buildings towards the road and away from the residents. So we can get some development closer to Bee Caves Road in a more modern, pedestrian-friendly way that incorporated trees and landscaping so that it's more of a walkable community. Impervious cover, the city should establish commercial impervious cover requirements that impervious cover shall not exceed 55%, provided that no new runoff development, no new project development will create any increases in stormwater runoff, but we also wanted to provide incentives for developers to do the things that we want to, so there are mechanisms in the place for developers to earn incentives and earn percentages of pervious cover if they do the things that we want them to do, like low-impact development practices such as rainwater harvesting, rain gardens, green roofs, conservation landscaping, etc. Also, again, back to enforcement, certification process so that all requirements associated with impervious cover incentives, stormwater management, and water quality be mandatory, not subject to variance, and enforced by requirements for engineering certification. Where roofs and other things are visible from adjacent residential lots, the city should adopt appropriate design requirements to mask or eliminate the impact of such things on the nearby residents. And the city should adopt lighting design criteria to eliminate the impact of adjacent residential properties. Again, I can speak to my personal experience, which is that I have to have dark blackout curtains on my back windows. Otherwise, it is far too bright in my bedroom at night because of the lights on Bee Caves Road. And one of the things that we've tried to do, again, we're taking guesses at some of these things, for example, lighting, is make it so that it has a minimal impact on existing uses, but that as these properties get redeveloped, that's when, for the most part, the lighting restrictions would kick in. Requirements that landscaping within the setback along Bee Caves Road where possible and along pedestrian walkways include sufficient trees to shade sidewalks and pedestrian paths. We kind of envision this much more walkable, pedestrian-friendly, shaded Bee Caves Road in the future. We had a safe harbor that would allow the rebuilding on existing lots, and I think probably the lawyers and consultants are better at talking about that, but through our subcommittee group, it became clear that they did not advise that. And so we went into crafting a special exception for lots that would have trouble rebuilding within the new 75 foot setback. I would recognize that the current setback is 100 feet, so would even have more trouble under existing. We're actually giving them a little more flexibility than they used to, but there might be lots that are still unbuildable, and so that the recommendation from legal is that we move to a special exception and not a coded safe harbor. Update commercial signage regulations. Again, this was another area where that was the recommendation. We knew that there were probably I think we were told there were some legal problems with the existing signage regulations, so we wanted to move to modern signage regulations, which was a guess that we had to take, the committee had to take on what those would be based on the consultants and legal's recommendations. And again, post-permit enforcement and penalties. So that concludes my portion. Councilmember Brown, do you want to come up and speak next?
Brooke Brown, 307 Nixon. Members of the council and members of planning and zoning, what my part of this presentation will be is to walk you through two tools that we've created to facilitate review of the 56-page document, which are the actual zoning changes. So I'd like to walk through those two documents with you and explain the purpose of each one of those, and then to go into some detail of how what's in, where the sections are that address each of the policies that Ryan and Tom have just reviewed. So if you start with the document that's called the Summary of the Comprehensive Plan Revisions. The other one. I'll show you. This document takes each of the policies that are adopted in the comprehensive plan and walks through those policy by policy. These policies are stated in the comprehensive plan beginning at page 44. So what's in bold in this summary is the policy as stated in the comprehensive plan, and then the indented paragraph underneath shows which sections in the document address that policy and hopefully accomplish that policy. The index, which is the other document, if you could, Nikki, if you could go to the index briefly. The index is a section by section description going from page 1 of the composite draft to the last page of the composite draft, and identifies by section. If you prefer to go through it in page order, then you would want to use this index, and this index then explains what each section in the comprehensive draft does by section. So depending on what your style is and how you prefer to review the zoning changes, you can do it either by policy and review of the specific sections, or section by section, and there's a brief description in the index that goes from each section you'll find in order, in page order in the document, back to what that section's intended to do. So what I will focus on now is the summary. So if we can go back to the summary, what I'd like to do is walk through this summary and address the areas that are in the draft ordinances that will address each part of the each of the policies that are in the comprehensive plan. If all that's making sense, and I hope those participating, these documents are posted on the website. If you don't have a copy with you, they're on the website and available for public review. So these are also documents the public can use to walk through this, the draft ordinance. Beginning with comprehensive plan policy number 1, the first task that was the draft addresses is that the decision in the comprehensive plan to allow any use formerly allowed in the office commercial section of Rolling Wood to be done in the retail section of Rolling Wood, and vice versa. If you remember Tom pointing out the pink and turquoise sections from the zoning map, to this point in time, if your property is zoned office, then you can't have a retail establishment. If your property is zoned retail, then you can't have an office there. And so we've combined the uses and now have a single district called the C Commercial District. So it took a little bit of work to get that done, and the sections in the code that address that task are listed under policy number 1. In terms of uses allowed for retail and uses allowed for office, we've taken the existing uses and haven't added any new additional uses there. And the same thing with prohibited uses. What's prohibited currently, either in office or retail, would be prohibited in the future under the new C district. The addition that we have made to address the concerns that if we allow certain retail uses adjacent to residential district, adjacent to the residential district, such as a restaurant, then we need to address the potential conflict with the residential area, such as smells, exhaust, and those sorts of things, and we do that through a special use permit. That's the plan under the new draft. On policy number 2, on the north side of Bee Caves Road, limit development on commercial lots to 2 stories and 30 feet in height. On the south side of Bee Caves Road, limit development to 3 stories and 45 feet in height. We've done that in a single paragraph. That turned out to be one of the easier things to do in a single paragraph, because only those properties that are on the north side of Bee Caves Road are adjacent to residential properties. And so that is how we made that distinction in the height allowed on either side of Bee Caves Road. Policy number 3, maintain current Rollingwood Drive frontage setbacks between commercial buildings and Rollingwood Drive. As Ryan explained, we have that triangle of property at the where Rollingwood Drive meets Bee Caves Road, near the McDonald's, that we have maintained the existing 30-foot setbacks there. Policy number 4, prohibit clearing of native vegetation within the FEMA floodplain. This is a section of the code that wasn't very well defined in our current code, and we've worked to define it here. For those properties that are, it's sometimes called the green belt, it's sometimes called a 100-foot green belt, sometimes the green belt's less than 100 feet. It doesn't touch all of the commercial properties on the north side of Bee Caves Road, but a number of them. And so what we, to prohibit the clearing of native vegetation, we've retained that requirement, or we've imposed, the new code will have that requirement, that the existing vegetation along Eanes Creek must be maintained as it currently exists, but within the 75-foot setback, not the 100-foot setback. It would allow the removal of damaged, dead, or dying vegetation, but could not be clear-cut. On policy plan number 5, work with stakeholders to create a safer pedestrian crossing at Bee Caves Road. That was not a task this committee took on in this draft. We still want to do it. We just have focused on doing the zoning changes necessary to implement the policy at this point. Comprehensive Plan Policy 6, replace current setbacks between commercially zoned properties and residentially zoned properties with a 75-foot setback measured from the edge of any residentially zoned lot to the edge of any building on any commercially zoned lot. The sections that accomplish that are listed. As we addressed previously, this code would require native vegetation to be maintained. In addition, and this is the policy requires replanting of previously cleared spaces within the 75-foot setback between the edge of any residentially zoned lot and the edge of any building on any commercially zoned lot. What we have done there is to have a provision added to the code that in any area where there's no existing vegetative screen between a residential lot and a commercial lot, landscaping is required. Obviously, there's no existing vegetative screen there. Landscaping is required, and have set out minimums for trees and shrubs with a standard of 90% opacity within 2 years of installation. And so that's the kind of detail that's not in the comprehensive plan, but is consistent with other codes we've reviewed for buffering between residential and commercial properties, and would only apply really to those commercial properties that are west of the Palisades, where there's not the FEMA floodplain or existing vegetative existing green belt, and some of those properties will back up to South Peak, and some of those properties back up to other commercial properties but face Rollingwood Drive. So that's an area where we applied a little bit of common sense, and what we hope we hit the right mark, but that's a place to give some thought to. Policy number 7, reduce the number of ingress and egress points on Bee Caves Road, eliminate any existing code provisions that require a driveway on every commercially zoned lot. What this code would do would be to require shared use and access between commercial properties for driveways and for parking. It goes a little bit beyond what the policy is, which is to eliminate provisions that would eliminate code provisions that require driveway. What we've done instead is to require shared driveways and shared use. So that's another issue for the council and P&Z's consideration. We think that that's what a number of property owners are already doing, and so to encourage that would also encourage the policy. We don't find it inconsistent, but there could be debate about whether it goes beyond the stated policy. We also wanted to bring to the attention of P&Z and the council that in discussing parking, we became comfortable after much discussion with our planner, Bryce Cox from Charlie's firm, that it would be a good idea to give consideration to eliminating minimum parking requirements. And some of the considerations in that are that you may have a lot today that is, let's say, for example, Chinatown is a restaurant. In the future, that may be some other use that may not require the same kind of parking that Chinatown does. It could be an office building in the future. And it seemed to be the better plan to eliminate parking minimums for two reasons. One, to encourage walkability, and two, and that's probably not the main one, but that the property owner is probably in a better stead to determine how much parking to be set aside for any particular building. We also talked about availability of parking and shared parking as between uses on adjacent lands, and thought that by requiring shared parking, that also impacts the notion that we set minimum parking spaces for each lot. If you're sharing with your neighbor, then obviously you may not need as big a space as if you were not sharing. So that's another policy issue that needs consideration and input. Policy number 8, encourage the building of walking and biking paths on commercially zoned lots along the south side of Dry Creek on the north side of Bee Caves Road. We've done that through allowing for added impervious cover in the event that those trails are dedicated by those lots that are adjacent to Eanes Creek. The city policy number 9, require an as-built survey as a part of final permitting and issuance of the certificate of occupancy. We've done that in the proposed code. There's one question whether we put it in the right section of the code, but that's just a technicality, and the policy, the enforcement language is there. We're just debating whether it's in the proper section of the code. Comprehensive Plan Policy 10, modify development standards as follows. Front setback. The front setback for commercial properties along the north side of Bee Caves Road be reduced from the current 25-foot setback to a 5-foot setback where the developer has agreed to contribute any required right-of-way to TxDOT, and 2, implement a landscape plan including appropriate irrigation and maintenance that provides native species shade trees along sidewalks and rear lot pedestrian paths. So this policy would implement, the proposed code implements this policy except for the requiring the lot owner to contribute required right-of-way to TxDOT. And I think Tom may want to speak to this issue also. After consideration, it would be the recommendation to eliminate that requirement, mainly because it could leave the city outside of those discussions at the time of that TxDOT comes to ask for additional right-of-way. And that could be to the detriment of the city, that these negotiations to get the dedication are difficult to negotiate and require consent of all owners, and that's a better practice than having that dedicated at the time a building permit is being required. So that was the consideration there. I think Tom's been through that process once and counseled us on that. So I did want to point that out. The new sections in the code do allow the front setback reduction from 25 feet. There's a typo there, 25 feet to 5 feet, where the applicant has adopted a landscape plan that provides for trees along sidewalks on Bee Caves Road and has dedicated a pedestrian path along Eanes Creek. Policy number 11, impervious cover. The policy requires that the city set impervious cover not to exceed 55%, provided that no new project will create increases to stormwater runoff, either volume or rate of flow of runoff. And we've addressed that by allowing an increase to impervious cover. It's currently 50%, up to 55% if the increase does not create an increase in the volume or rate of flow of stormwater runoff. That requirement being both certified at the time the building plan is approved, and also a second certification at the time that the the plan is built, an as-built certification that requirement is met. Policy Plan 12 is an additional incentive in the form of an increase in impervious cover from 55 to 60% if the development includes low impact practices such as rainwater harvesting, bioretention, rain gardens, green roofs, infiltration, filter strips, any combination of these green designs, and natural area preservation over and above the required greenbelt setbacks, up to an additional 10% if there are no increases to stormwater runoff, either in volume or rate of flow, and the plan meets all TCEQ best management practices for water quality and the design elements that are described. So that is also, you'll find that in what is called the buffering section of the buffering and landscape section of the code, of the proposed code, which are identified there. 60%. 60%.
So it's not an additional, it's an additional 10% over what's currently low, but not an additional 10% over.
Right. From 50 to 60. Yeah. Plan Policy 13, we've talked about this. A certification is required that the plan meet the requirements that are in the code. Engineering certification at the time the permit is, application is filed, and certification as built. Policy number 14, design requirements to lessen the impact of commercial development to adjacent residential properties. These are things like roof design, coverage of mechanical elements, masking of mechanical elements on the roof and at ground level, and a vegetative buffer and safety features between residential and commercial lot where there is no green belt. topographical or line of sight buffer. So these are all in two sections, 107-109 and 107-116 of the proposed code. Policy Plan 15, the policy is that the city should adopt lighting design criteria to eliminate the impact to adjacent residential properties, to require down-shield nighttime lights, and adopt standards consistent with dark skies lighting policies of similarly sized Central Texas Hill Country communities. So here is where the standard is fairly loosely designed. What we did was look to lighting policies of adjacent Hill Country communities. The policy would not necessarily meet all of the requirements of the dark skies certification, and we're not proposing that Rolling Wood attempt to obtain dark skies certification, but they do include the main features of dark skies, which is shielding of light fixtures, meaning bulbs are not exposed, limiting the amount of light that might trespass on adjacent properties. In other words, your lighting fixture should be designed such that the light emitted when it hits the ground hits your ground and not your neighbor's ground, and that it does have limits on maximum intensities and on uplighting, and would apply not to any existing building, but apply to new builds and as lighting fixtures are updated on existing buildings. So we looked at Sunset Valley, Bee Caves, Wimberley, Dripping Springs, Lakeway, and those communities for consistency and simplicity, frankly, in lighting design. Review and revise, number 16, review and revise necessary ordinances regarding interior and exterior lighting. We relied on our planner, Bryce, to bring our code up to date with respect to both technology and signage, particularly, and lighted signage. So that's a fairly standard set of rules that apply generally for commercial properties for signage and lighted signage. Plan policy number 17, landscaping, shade, setback incentives for commercial properties. The policy is to require landscaping within the setback along Bee Caves Road where possible and along any pedestrian walkways, include sufficient trees to shade sidewalks and pedestrian paths. Here, the new code would require trees be installed along rights-of-way adjacent to Bee Caves Road and any pedestrian path along Eanes Creek. The standard is 1 tree per 25 linear feet of frontage, which is the current standard for buffering between commercial lots and is a common standard in codes that require trees along sidewalks. And so we did not expand landscaping requirements other than to require trees along Bee Caves Road right of way and along the Eanes Creek. So the for properties that don't that aren't redeveloped, the existing code requires some landscaping in parking lots and between buildings and residential areas. We did not change any of that or eliminate it, but for buildings that are redesigned and brought forward on Bee Caves Road, what we require in terms of landscaping is trees along the right-of-way and any sidewalks, if that makes sense. The employee policy number 18, employ a tree ordinance similar to that in residential areas to preserve heritage trees that requires replacement of heritage trees with a tree or trees of the same species and having the same total caliper inches and require replacement or other protected trees so as to maintain current tree canopies. In this section of the code, there's one section, 107-120, that mirrors in many ways the existing residential tree canopy ordinance, but with some fairly significant changes. One, it would applies the same definition of protected species, so no change in the types of trees that are protected. It would protect a protected tree, meaning, let's say, a protected tree is any of this protected species, a tree of any of the protected species, regardless of size. And then protected trees having a diameter of 12 inches or greater in diameter would require a permit for removal, conditioned on the issuance of a special exception by the Board of Adjustment. The same thing would apply to a heritage tree defined as a protected species tree of a diameter of 24 inches or greater. That would also require a variance. The proposed policy would also protect existing protected species trees by giving a credit against other landscaping requirements where an existing protected species tree of a diameter of 4 inches or greater is kept. In other words, this code would go beyond what's in the residential code by having a tougher standard to remove any tree, any protected species tree 12 inches or greater, including a very tough standard for removing any heritage tree as defined here. And then third, it would give a credit where a property owner maintains existing protected trees. It would give a credit for the maintenance of that tree against any additional landscaping requirement. That would help soften the blow of maintaining a protected tree or a heritage tree, because you get a credit for any requirement against requirements to plant trees along a sidewalk, so to speak. You know, that's a judgment call. It's a call that is not that the group developing this part of the code thought was appropriate, but it needs to be vetted, and it needs to be made public how we have attempted, what the proposal is to protect heritage trees, and does it hit the right mark within the community. This policy would also require protection of critical root zones during construction and an enforcement mechanism if those requirements are not met or if a tree is wrongfully removed. It also requires that trees permitted to be removed be mitigated by the planting of new trees of the same species, which is not in the current residential code. So give that your attention and see if we've hit the mark. Policy plan number 19, the safe harbor. This safe harbor provision was drafted after some consultation with our city attorney about what the city could do. As we've talked about, there are certain areas where commercial lots do not have a 75-foot greenbelt buffer. The proposed policy was to allow the rebuilding of existing structures if they were in compliance with city ordinances at the time, and if the new build was limited to the footprint of the existing structure. We were advised by the city attorney that that would conflict with the requirements for rebuilding of non-conforming structures. There, you can only rebuild a non-conforming structure if it's damaged by means other than the property owner's own actions. And so this, as the policy was drafted, it would allow any current developer to redevelop the same building on the same footprint. And so that would not, that would conflict with the non-conforming, the limits of rebuilding of non-conforming structures generally. And so what was drafted is a special exception. This provision would, where the 75-foot greenbelt would not exist today, would be primarily from the Palisades building west. And so on the north side of Bee Caves Road, the special exception would be permitted if the Board of Adjustment found that the proposed development as compared to the existing development mitigates the impact of the existing development upon adjacent residential properties and or improves to the greatest extent practicable the buffering of the adjacent residential properties and preserves and enhances existing landscapes to the greatest reasonable extent. And so, for example, if a property that was clear-cut in violation of the code a long time ago is now proposed for redevelopment, that would be the and there's no existing greenbelt there. This would be the standard that would apply to the redevelopment of that lot. It would also apply to the redevelopment of the lots at the westernmost end of Rollingwood Drive where there isn't an existing 75-foot greenbelt. So then policy number 20, update commercial signage regulations as needed to bring rules up to date with modern technology and building needs. This identifies the sections of the code that address signage. The changes, and this comes primarily from Bryce, our planner, allow for A-frame and store window signs, clarification of sign measurement methods, a prohibition on signs facing adjacent residentially zoned properties, replacement of references to neon signs with language allowing lighted signs that are white in color, allow lighted signs for any commercially zoned property. This was previously prohibited on office buildings, updating standards for building signs and establishing standards for store, window, and A-frame signs. So that's what's in the signing provisions of the draft. Plan Policy 21, post-permit enforcement and penalties. Update enforcement and penalties for zoning ordinance violations is necessary to ensure the city has adequate tools for code enforcement. These have been updated. Our city attorney's been working to develop a uniform set of enforcement requirements for all zoning violations. So that's what, instead of having different enforcement regulations depending on the section of the code in which it exists, we've developed a uniform set of enforcement mechanisms. There are some exceptions to this. For example, in the tree ordinance, if a tree is removed, there's some different enforcement mechanisms there. And we have the added mechanism of requiring as-built certification for those design requirements that lead to additional impervious cover, reduced impervious cover limits and other incentives that are in the code. So that's a walkthrough. It's a lot of material. What is next? In addition to this meeting, meetings have been scheduled. There have been 2 meetings scheduled at P&Z to consider these code changes and to make a recommendation to the council. The first one is May 8 at P&Z. The second one is the first one is May 1. The second P&Z meeting is May 8. And then once the city council gets the P&Z recommendation, the city council has scheduled 2 meetings, one on May 22nd. Both of these will be special council meetings, given the length of the material to be addressed. They're not on a regular city council agenda. So those meetings are May 22nd and May 29, and they'll deal just with these changes. So I think anyone on the team here is happy to answer any questions, or I'll return the mic to the mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate all your hard work. How I'd like to do this, I think, is we'll let anyone, we are going to have a public hearing here in a moment on these items that you've heard discussed, but let's talk about the presentation first, and I'm happy to recognize anyone one by one that wants to come up. Since it is sort of packed in here for a change, just raise your hand, I'll recognize you, and then come to the podium for any comments or questions. Yes, sir, come on up.
Yeah, I just have a few questions
Just,
that popped up.
Just recognize yourself.
Yeah, Bill Fowler. I own the office building next to Chinatown, so 2714.
Great.
Okay. And so I just had a few questions that I thought of as the lady was going through that. What is the rationale to limit the north side of Big Caves to 2 stories and the south side to 3 stories?
I'll have Ms. Brown, do you want to take that one?
I'll be happy to.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. We had quite a bit of discussion within the community when there was a prior proposal before the council to allow a zoning change that would permit multi-use buildings up to 4 stories. That stretch of Bee Caves Road adjoins one of our major residential streets. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Timberline, but there are a number of homes that adjoin that property. After some significant amount of discussion, the city actually conducted a citywide survey to address that requirement, whether or not residents of the city were wanted to allow for that level of development along Bee Caves Road. And I've forgotten the exact percentage of responses, but it was overwhelmingly recommended that that side of Bee Caves Road be limited to the 2 stories, 30 feet and 35 feet, I think, in 2 stories. 30 feet and 2 stories.
Yes.
So it was a result of a community-wide survey.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Okay, then my other question would be, would any of these recommendations cause a landowner such as myself to have to do anything in reaction to these changes? In other words, if we kept the usage as it is, as it's been for the last 40 years, do we have to go in and make any changes? Do we have to create a green belt and plant trees and all that?
I'm going to give you an off-the-cuff no, but I'll have Ms. Brown come back up.
The answer is no, except that if you change out your lighting fixtures, they would have to become compliant. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, hearing none, we will move on from agenda item number 3 under presentations and move on to the public hearing section. I'll call up agenda item number 4, public hearing and discussion regarding an amendment to the city's Code of Ordinances, Part 1, Chapter 24, Signs and Advertising, and Part 2, Chapters 101, Buildings and Construction, 103, Environmental Protection and Control, and 107, Zoning, related to aligning the city's code with the recommendations in the city's comprehensive plan for the commercial corridor and other matters in connection therewith. And I will open the public hearing at 7:12 p.m. We are open for public hearing. I'll just kind of ask Ms. Wayman to explain the process here of what we're doing.
Sure, so we do have a sign-up sheet in the back that if you came in and signed up on that, we'll be happy to call your names. But again, feel free to raise your hands if you'd like to speak for this. So what we'll do here is we'll open and close this public hearing after everyone has had a chance to speak. And then we do have discussion for if the City Council or the Planning and Zoning Commission would like to discuss any of the public comments that came out of the public hearing. And then we'll do the same for item 5. And then at that point, there will be no action taken tonight. All of the action will be at a future meeting after the 2 Planning and Zoning Commission meetings where they have a chance to discuss these in depth and will make their recommendation to council.
That was the punchline I was looking for.
Oh,
so,
there you
yeah.
go. No action.
No action tonight.
Right.
But this is your opportunity to weigh in on these items in one of the public hearings that we want to have and are required to have. So with that, the agenda item number 4 is open for anyone to testify who would want to. Not everyone rush up. I see Braden back there. No, it's tempting though, right? Okay. Do we have? Okay.
I'm advised by our city secretary that we don't know for sure if Mr. White wants to.
Ms. Are you good on testimony for tonight? Okay, we're good. With that, we will close the public hearing on agenda item number 4 at 7:13 p.m. Thank you all, and move on to agenda item number 5. Public hearing and discussion on the rezoning of the following parcels of land from Professional and Business Office District C1 and Business District C2 to Commercial District C. 5100 Rollingwood, oh, this is going to have to get something out. 5100 Rollingwood Drive, 2901 Bee Cave Road, 3160 Bee Cave Road, 3144 Bee Cave Road, 3102 Bee Cave Road, 2900 Bee Cave Road, 3103 Bee Cave Road, 2826 Bee Cave Road, 3101 Bee Cave Road, 2829 Bee Cave Road, 1015 Bee Cave Road, 2824 Bee Cave Road, 3012 Bee Cave Road, 2814 Bee Cave Road, 3010 Bee Cave Road, 2808 Bee Cave Road, 3008 Bee Cave Road, 2802 Bee Cave Road, 3001 Bee Cave Road, 2800 Bee Cave Road, 3006 Bee Cave Road, 2724 Bee Cave Road, 2720 Bee Cave Road, 2714 Bee Cave Road, 2712 Bee Cave Road, 2710 Bee Cave Road, 2708 Bee Cave Road, 2706 Bee Cave Road, 2700 Bee Cave Road, Travis County Appraisal District Property ID numbers 721173 and 105621. And I read that first. I probably would have done that a different way, but that is your layout of agenda item number 5. So with that, does anyone wish to testify on this item on the agenda? Do you have anyone signed up? And we're opening this public hearing at 7:15 p.m. Thank you. And going once, going twice. Okay, with that, hearing no one wishing to testify on agenda item number 5, we will close public testimony at 7:15 p.m. Thank you all for being here. Do we have anything else to cover, Ms. Wayman?
We do not, unless Planning and Zoning or City Council would like to discuss, but there's plenty of time for that at our 2 meetings coming up starting next week.
I do appreciate everyone laying this out for consideration. These are some meaty documents, so feel free to digest them, think about them, look at them, and you will have an opportunity for further comment and discussion at the next public hearing. Ms. Brown, do you have something?
I just forgot something I was going to say, and that is I am keeping a folder. If anyone has suggestions or changes, if you will shoot me a copy or shoot Ashley a copy, we're going to keep a folder so that we, as suggestions or changes come in, we don't miss anything and we make sure it gets reviewed and considered.
Great, thank you. And while you're there, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, Phil beat you to it. City Council is now adjourned, and
And I will take a motion to adjourn planning and zoning. Well, first. Second. Got it?